I'm Sugar Ray Seals, 1972 Olympic gold medalist, and I'm a fan of the Ringside Boxing Show.
Live from Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, welcoming you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Responsi, today and every week for the hottest, sweatiest show on the West Coast. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show.
Welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor, and we've got another great show planned for you today. In just a bit, we will be joined by Jackie Kallen, the First Lady of Boxing, a woman who forged her path in an otherwise all-male boxing world. First as a publicist for Tommy Hearns, then as a manager for James Toney and Bronco McCart and Matt Remillard and others. Her life story has been made into a major motion picture starring Meg Ryan, and she's also written a couple of books. This is a woman who's got a lot of amazing stories to tell about her life in boxing and also the entertainment world, and we're going to ask her to do just that during the second half of today's show. Paul McLaughlin, our British correspondent, has his weekly report for us from the United Kingdom, and we're going to break down the week in boxing right now with our expert analyst. Travis Hartman's a professional boxer, trainer, and promoter from Osborne, Missouri. He's now living and training in Orlando, Florida. Rizwan Zahid's a boxing journalist from Toronto. John J. Responsi is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. And John and I co-authored Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti Mickey Ward boxing trilogy, which is an Amazon bestseller. So, guys, let's start with Saturday's big fight on HBO. Daniel Jacobs won a very close competitive split decision over previously undefeated Sergey Derevyanchenko. Tom Schreck and Steve Weisfeld, the judges, both scored at 115 to 113 for Jacobs. Julie Lederman had at 114 to 113 for Derevyanchenko. Jacobs scored a flash knockdown on Derevyanchenko in the closing seconds of the very first round, so that wound up being the difference. Travis, how did you see it? Who do you think won the fight?
You know, I didn't really get a chance to watch the entire fight, so I just saw some of the highlights. But
okay.
I think the fight did go, as even Riz was saying, that he thought it would be a really close fight. This by no means was supposed to be a fight where Jacobs was going to blow this guy out. I mean, Derevyanchenko has legit skills, and he proved that by, losing a split decision. And I think that just from watching the highlights, and like I said, I didn't go into it, I didn't watch the full 12 rounds, just from watching the highlights, it looked like Jacobs did what he was supposed to do, and 115, 113 seemed to be fair. I haven't heard too many people complaining that, it was a robbery or a hometown decision. For the most part, it was a competitive fight, and Derevyanchenko was who we thought he was. It wasn't a gimme, and it wasn't a walkover fight. And Jacobs now, hopefully we're going to see a Canelo-Jacobs fight, but doubtful because I think Jacobs has a really good shot at beating Canelo, so I don't know if Canelo will take that fight right away. But I know it's up there. I know they've been talking about it already. I know Eddie Hearn is talking about it already as well.
Yeah, John, how did you score? What did you see?
I didn't have a problem with the scoring. I saw the whole fight. I'm still going to write an article about it. The knockdown was the difference for the scorecards, really, if there hadn't been a knockdown. I mean, Jacobs was probably winning the first round anyway, and then it was 10-8, so there's your 2 points. But rounds-wise, 8-4, 7-5 was what I saw. Jacobs was just better as far as versatility. I mean, that's going to be my theme for my article is he's just got more ammunition. He's got more things that he can do in there. He's a better athlete. He could move better. I mean, Derevyanchenko was trying hard, though. You really had to give it to the guy. He took some hellacious shots, and he kept coming. Very sturdy, very prideful, and it was a good fight. But Jacobs just had more. He got in trouble once in the second round. He got buzzed. He said he saw stars, so he felt it. And these guys have sparred so many rounds. They knew each other pretty well. So it was one of these fights that was a slow fight at times, but then there would be flurries where they would just wing wicked shots at each other. And Jacobs' body work was really impressive. I've never seen him go to the body like that. And he fought a very controlled fight. I thought he deserved a decision. I was a little surprised by Julie Lederman's scoring, but Max Lederman kept saying that there was a couple of rounds that could go the other way, and if they do, possibly it would be a split, and he was right. But Jacobs deserved the win, and I agree with Canelo. You know, the Canelo. I'm sorry, I agree with Travis. A Canelo fight with Jacobs, boy, that would be tough because that is a style nightmare for Jacobs. For Canelo, I'm sorry. Yeah, and just Jacobs is just taller. He's got a reach advantage. He's quick. He's such a good athlete, and Canelo's quick and all that. But this would just be a very difficult fight for Canelo, and I don't think they want that right away. I think it could happen at some point, but again, I agree that they don't want to put their $6 million, $300 million man in there with a guy that could beat him right away. So they're going to take their time on that one. But Jacobs certainly looked good. Riz and I both thought he could lose. We thought he could lose or he'll win a close decision. So whatever way you look at it, we were right. But he deserved it. And he fought hard. The thing was he never really got hit solidly, and that saved him because it looked like Derevyanchenko had the power to really hurt him. Like I said, he did hurt him in the second round, but his defense was very solid, and he's just a good fighter, you know. And whatever we think about his chin, because we like to think he's still chinny, and he has been wobbled a few times, but he's in great shape. I think better shape now than he was a couple of years ago, and he deserved the nod.
Travis, why do you think Canelo or Jacobs is a tough match for Canelo? And if you're Canelo, who would you want to fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough match because Daniel Jacobs is bigger, taller, longer, rangier, hits harder. I mean, he can take a punch. We saw him take a punch against Triple G, so I think all of the odds for sure would be stacked against Canelo in that fight, and styles do make fights, and I don't think that style matches up with Canelo. So I mean, at the end of the day, though, guys, I got to give it to Canelo because Canelo stepped up, and he really has fought tough guys, and he's fought really tough guys that nobody ever wanted to fight, like Erislandy Lara, Triple G. I mean, he really does fight the best. So would it surprise me if he actually stepped up and fought Jacobs? No, it really wouldn't. But what would surprise me is if Hearn let that happen because, like you just said, you know, Canelo just signed that $350-some million deal with DAZN, or however you say the online streaming that Hearn started. The Zone. Yeah, you're right. So I think that I would be more surprised if Eddie Hearn lets that happen right away. I wouldn't be surprised if Canelo wants it. I've really been on Canelo's side on the opponents that he actually does end up fighting because I think he has fought the best, and I don't think he shied away. I never think he's shied away from a tough challenge. I think it's always been his promoter, which is Oscar De La Hoya, or now it'll probably be Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn doesn't want to get his guy beat, you know, by Daniel Jacobs. Not yet, at least. But I think we are also, guys, in a different climate and a different boxing era than we ever have been, where it used to be if you had one loss on your record, you know, you were kind of ruined, but not anymore. The past 2 or 3 years, promoters, matchmakers, television has been making these guys match these guys tough and making them fight tough fights, and I think we're seeing that's why boxing is growing, and that's why we are seeing the fan base extending, and that's why we're seeing a streaming network like DAZN, who just inserted like $3 billion into boxing for this online streaming network. So I think that's why we are seeing a lot better competition because these fighters are fighting better competition. So I wouldn't be surprised completely if Jacobs and Canelo fight within the year. I would say it'd be a couple of years down the road because I think Canelo is up against a little bit of a mismatch because I just think Daniel Jacobs is a lot bigger, taller, rangier, hits harder, Canelo's beat some of the best out there, but I just think Daniel Jacobs is just a little too big, in my opinion.
Interesting. So, John, you previewed Regis Prograis' fight with Terry Flanagan in the World Boxing Super Series 140-pound tournament, and you felt like Prograis' power was going to be the difference. And that's pretty much what happened in that fight, isn't it? Prograis scored a knockdown, and he won on the scorecards by 7, 9, and 11 points over Flanagan, who was no slouch. He was 33-1 and a former world title holder. How impressive was the Rougarou?
Oh, I was really impressed because, I previewed his power, but what he showed, and I said this in my article, Dennis, is that he showed how he can box.
Yeah.
And his jab was stinging all the whole fight, and it kept Flanagan off balance. And that was what really impressed me. And he said, everybody just thinks that I can brawl, and this is how I fight in the gym. It was really an impressive performance. His previous fight, when he fought at home, I thought he seemed a little sluggish, probably because of all the pressure, all the extra things you have to do. I mean, Travis can talk to this fighting at home is no vacation. But he said he was used to it now. He did it. He was used to it now. He knew how to deal with it. And you could tell he looked totally relaxed in there. He was having fun. He jabbed, and boom, when he knocked Flanagan down, who's never been stopped, it was with the left hand, that powerful left hand that the guest we had on a few weeks ago, Joel Diaz Jr., certainly knows about. And I was just really impressed. I think no matter who fights him, they're going to have a hard time because he's showing now, and this is what the great fighters do. I wouldn't say he's great yet, but they show that they can do different things. And he did it, and that was what impressed me more than anything. I thought he would possibly stop Flanagan late, but the fact that he stuck to his game plan, and he probably only lost like one round. He probably lost the fifth round. That was it. That's how much he dominated a former world champion. So the Rougarou was on his game. He was primed, and again, the World Boxing Super Series is fun because you've got these talented guys going at each other. And I really believe that if anything is helping boxing, and I think everything is, but these tournaments are really great because even the casual fans who you bring into the sport can get interested because we're talking about really good fighters here, and they're fighting each other, and that's the way it should be.
Travis, how excited are you about this WBSS? Ivan Baranchik of Russia went to 19-0 in the other quarterfinal yesterday with a seventh-round stoppage of this guy, Anthony Yigit, who was 21-0-1, two undefeated fighters there. On the other side of the bracket, we're going to have Josh Taylor of Scotland, who's 13-0 with 11 knockouts, against U.S. fighter Ryan Martin, who's 22-0 with 12 KOs. And then you've also got Ryan Burnett, Northern Ireland guy, who's 19-0 with 9 knockouts, and he's going to face Nonito Donaire, who's a future Hall of Famer, 6 major world titles in 4 weight divisions. All that's going to be Saturday in Glasgow, Scotland. Travis, this is an amazing bracket, and it's really hard to pick a favorite. But, and then you got Regis. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, this is stacked. This is like a Super Bowl of Super Bowls almost. Maybe the complete best of the best aren't fighting each other yet, but I think we're going to see a massive superstar emerge out of this. And then you're going to see some crowd-pleasing guys who are just going to be like, gain a bunch of fans because of the exposure of the WBSS, because of all of these guys fighting the best. And that's what, at the end of the day, I think that's what TV is even noticing now with the ratings is when the best fight the best, fans tune in. And they're finally picking up on this, and the matchmakers and promoters are picking up on this. Where back in the day, it used to be, let's get one of our, 25-0 guys and put him in there with a tomato can and showcase him. Well, nobody wants to see that anymore, and we're seeing that. We want to see the best fighting the best, and if the best aren't fighting the best, well, we want to see an up-and-coming kid that nobody's ever heard of fighting the best, at least that he's undefeated and proven and giving him a chance. And I think that's what this WBSS series is doing, is giving a lot of guys who a lot of us have never heard of, yet they're very viable and very worthy opponents. And like I said, I think we're going to see a superstar emerge out of this, and there's already a couple superstars in this. I mean, Nonito Donaire is 100% a first ballot Hall of Famer. The guy was a pound-for-pound best. Obviously, he's on the downturn of his career, but he can still fight, period. That's all there is to it. The guy knows how to fight. So that series is an awesome series. And like I said, the fans are tuning in, and we're seeing that in the ratings. We're seeing that in the popularity of boxing. And this is exactly the roadmap to growing boxing to new heights. And we're looking at that globally. We are growing boxing globally, especially with these WBSS series, and that's exactly what boxing needs. And that's exactly what some of these fighters from overseas need. They need to be seen by American audiences. They need to be seen by global audiences, and that's what's happening right now. We're talking about it on American radio right now, and there's, 1 or 2 Americans in the whole tournament, but yet we're still talking about it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and you know what? Prograis is already talking about going to welterweight and fighting Errol Spence. That guy's got some cojones. He's not a big guy, I wonder if he's big enough for welterweight. Flanagan was bigger than him. It looks like to me. His back looked bigger and he looked stronger, but man, he wasn't stronger. The Rougarou, wrong guy.
Well, Errol Spence is not your normal welterweight, so he's definitely too small for him even.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if either one of you guys saw Pulev fight Hughie Fury. Riz, who couldn't be with us today, apparently said it was a real stinker of a fight.
Yeah, but, I saw it.
Did you?
Yeah.
John, that makes Pulev the IBF mandatory challenger for Anthony Joshua, who's scheduled to return in April. First of all, does Pulev look like anything better to you than a safe tune-up fight for Joshua before AJ faces either Wilder or Tyson Fury? And secondly, do you think Hughie Fury is still relevant now that we add this disappointment to his earlier loss to Joseph Parker?
Well, Hughie Fury, when he fought Joseph Parker, his style, he pecks and pecks and pecks. He doesn't have a lot of power. He can box a little.
Yeah.
And actually, I thought he was going to be better than he's turned out to be. His two biggest fights he's lost. Something was wrong yesterday. He was there, but he wasn't. I don't think it was Pulev so much. I think it was maybe he had an off day, because I think he can do better than that. So he's only 24 years old, Dennis. So he can, whatever he's got, he'll get another shot because he's so young, which is good. And I like what Travis said before. We're not so fixated on one loss or whatever. You go back boxing history and you look at some of the greatest fighters. Take Jack Dempsey, for example, who was knocked out in the first round a couple of years before he fought Jess Willard. Fighters do lose. But Hughie Fury is never going to be like his cousin Tyson. He's big and all that, but I don't know. He is a stinker. His fighting style is a stinker. It grabs a lot. He's going to have to figure something out. But what are you going to do if you don't have a lot of power? I mean, that's why guys who don't have a lot of power, I mean, I admire guys that go in there without the big pulverizing power, because they know they're not going to knock you out unless they get lucky. They have to figure out another way to beat you. You talk about cojones. I mean, Paulie Malignaggi always pops into my mind. Vito Andafermo, another Paisan. I don't mean to be going on all the Italians here, but neither of them have a lot of pop. But maybe I do. Yeah. But no, they're just tough guys, and Hughie Fury is in that boat because he can't even break an egg barely with those punches, and he hung in there. But Pulev, I was just going to say, Dennis, Pulev is no more than a tune-up for Joshua. I just hope they don't make that fight. I don't want to see that fight. I don't want to see. I want to see Joshua fighting somebody tough. His last fight was competitive, but I want to see him get in there with Wilder. Obviously, it's getting old. It just gets repetitive. And Pulev, he won and all that, but I didn't think he would go into the fight. I actually thought Fury had a good shot to beat him. But yeah, that was one of the most boring heavyweight fights that I've seen. It was in the afternoon, and I had already took my nap, and it was already making me drowsy. So that tells you how boring it was. But that's the way it goes sometimes.
Travis, you made a bold prediction either yesterday or the day before. You decided you're picking Tyson Fury to beat Deontay on December 1st. What kind of vibrations are you feeling there?
I just feel like Tyson Fury is taking this fight legit serious. And I think that here's what I feel about Tyson Fury with his mental state is I feel like Tyson Fury has the mental capacity to put together one really good fight and then take 2 years off and then come back and do the same thing. So I really think he's mentally capable and he's mentally there and he's physically there for this fight. His training, everything looks to be legit. And I always said that if the Tyson Fury shows up that has always showed up to fight, he's going to make it awkward and damn hard for Deontay Wilder to figure out that puzzle. And I'm going to stand by it. I think that Tyson Fury is going to upset Deontay Wilder. I think we're going to see a Tyson Fury-Anthony Joshua fight. I think Anthony Joshua is going to beat Tyson Fury. And then I still think Deontay Wilder is still very viable and very good fight for Anthony Joshua. I think those two styles, the Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, I think those two styles make for a really, really good and crowd-pleasing fight. So I think eventually, even if Tyson Fury upsets Deontay Wilder, I think we will still see a Deontay Wilder-Anthony Joshua fight. But I think it gets derailed and gets delayed a little bit because I think Tyson Fury is going to upset Deontay Wilder. And I don't think it's going to be a pretty fight at all. I mean, most of Tyson Fury's fights aren't pretty, and that's probably where Hughie Fury, his cousin, got the fighting style from. Except Tyson kind of has the awkward style more perfected than Hughie Fury. But Tyson Fury is, I mean, I guess you guys can check me into the nut house, too, for picking Tyson Fury because he's certifiably crazy. I mean, I think we all can agree with it. He is certifiably crazy. He's got mental issues beyond recognition. But, like I said, I think that he's capable of holding it together for one fight. And then we're probably going to see him take about 6 or 7 months off possibly and then possibly fight an Anthony Joshua because he just, for some reason, he's in that spotlight, man. You're the heavyweight champion of the world. And I think most people that don't fight or are in the boxing game don't realize that there's a lot of pressure mentally on fighters. I mean, even the club level fighters, I mean, the mental pressure of doing good and succeeding and having people expect you to do good, it really is hard. And I think that Tyson Fury just let it get to him, and he turned to drugs and he turned to other stuff and he kind of just went haywire. And once you go haywire like that, it's hard to bring it back. The brain is definitely a fragile thing, and when you start messing with that, it's hard to come back from that completely. But like I said, I think he can pull it together for one big fight, and I think it's going to be against Deontay Wilder. And then I think he's going to cash in a massive paycheck against Anthony Joshua, and then I think he's going to ride off into the sunset in his white sleeveless jacket and padded balls.
Well, he not only turned to drugs, he turned to food. If he takes 6 or 7 months off, he's going to put 60 or 70 pounds on, you know, and I don't think he can yo-yo again.
He weighed like 400 pounds, I think, when he was gone for a few years.
Yeah,
he was about 400
big.
pounds. He's 6'8". You know, you're talking about a huge, giant person here. So,
man, you know, when you see Tyson Fury and Deontay in those face-to-face photos, Fury's so much bigger than Deontay. I didn't really realize, you know, how massive Fury is compared to Deontay Wilder. I thought they were a little bit closer than that, but Fury's a big guy.
Yeah. Fury is a big guy, and he's going to be down to probably 245, 250 when they fight. And Wilder usually weighs around 220, and he's probably got 2 inches on him. But you know, I don't think Travis is crazy at all. I mean, even though his name starts with a T, like Tyson, I don't think he's nutty at all. I think there's a very good chance that Tyson Fury. I'm not going to go out yet and say that he's going to win, but his style, again, like we were talking about Jacobs and Canelo. Tyson Fury's style for any heavyweight is a nightmare because he does things at 6'9", 250 pounds that guys don't do. I mean, he's a freak, and he's awkward as all hell, and that's going to just cause Wilder all kinds of problems. And as we know, Wilder can be outboxed. I mean, he could be outboxed by guys that are only okay boxers, and we know what a good boxer Tyson Fury is. He's probably going to get hit with punches he doesn't even see coming. He believes he's going to knock Fury out, and I believe that's very possible, but he's got to hit him first, you know, and hitting him is going to be the big challenge because Fury, like Travis said, Fury is a smart guy. He knows that Wilder's biggest weapon is his right hand, so obviously he's got to stay away from it. So he's going to do a lot of what he did with Klitschko. That's what's coming. He's going to stay on the outside, stay away from that right. He's going to grab him. He's going to maul him. He's going to walk him around. He's going to use that extra weight. And kill time and try to win a decision, I think, unless Wilder runs out of gas. But we got to think that Wilder knows this too, and that he's thinking, okay, I know what Fury's going to do, and I have a plan. He better, because if he doesn't have a plan, he's not going to win. So, no, it's not nutty at all. The possibility of Tyson Fury winning that fight is very, very possible.
Okay, and finally, and this is kind of a jump ball question for both of you. Can anybody make any sense out of this story that came out yesterday? Eddie Hearn and Matchroom DAZN signed Brandon Rios, who's lost 4 of his last 7 fights over the past 5 years, to a multi-fight contract. And nothing I can find indicates how many fights constitute a multi-fight deal. And I can only assume Hearn probably put an escape clause in there for himself. But, man, oh, man, this is a head-scratcher for me. Rios, I guess, was surprisingly competitive in February when he lost to Danny Garcia, but he's 32 years old, and nobody's been through more world wars than Brandon Rios, and I'm just not sure why Hearn sees Rios as relevant enough for an extended deal like that. He's fighting this guy, Ramon Alvarez, who's a journeyman. He's won 27 of his 36 fights. That fight's coming up in 3 weeks. Travis, any thoughts about that, what Hearn's thinking?
Yeah, I mean, Hearn knows what he's getting with Brandon Rios. He's going to put Brandon Rios in there. Hopefully he's going to beat Alvarez, which I believe is cousin to Canelo, I believe. And they're fighting in Kansas, which is where Brandon Rios is originally from. So, Brandon Rios' name still sells, so people will come to that show. So I think Eddie Hearn was just making a business move, so to speak, and he's going to probably feed Brandon Rios to the Wolves eventually with, I don't know who, but a top guy that's with Dazion and go from there. But it was a smart play. It's always good to have a Brandon Rios on your roster. It's not a bad thing because he can always put him in there literally with anybody. Brandon Rios will fight anybody. Brandon Rios will make it halfway exciting because of his fighting style. So I believe that multi-year deal is probably not for millions upon millions of dollars, but it's a good way to keep Brandon Rios just kind of out there and as a kind of a go-to guy, a valuable and viable opponent that will lose but will make it exciting and give it his all. That's what we know about Brandon Rios. He's exciting because he always gives it his all. He's very braggadocious a lot, so he makes press conferences pretty exciting sometimes. And like I said, he's got that straightforward style that he makes it exciting for fans to watch. So he'll be in a couple of good competitive fights, and then he'll probably ride off into the sunset, I'm hoping, because Brandon Rios should have retired a couple of years ago, and I think he did, but then he came back. Yeah. So I personally, as a fighter, just knowing what those wars take out of you, I don't want him to fight, but I know why Eddie Hearn did it, because for the fans' sake, and he knows that Brandon Rios is fan-friendly, and he's that type of guy. You can put him in there with anybody, and it will be exciting. It will probably be blood. There'll probably be a war. There'll probably be a lot of punches landed. And that's what Eddie Hearn did. It was a business move, but as for his physical health, I'm not all for that. I wish Brandon Rios would retire, but he's just trying to suck as much money as he possibly can out of boxing before he gets out, I'm guessing.
Yep. Okay. Well, hey, there's your fix for this week, Boxing Junkies, from Travis Hartman and John J. Responte. Riz couldn't make it this week. These guys are the best. Thanks, fellas. You guys have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, guys.
Paul McLaughlin is coming up next to talk about the Fury Boys and John Ryder and maybe some other things on his weekly report from the United Kingdom. And then the First Lady of Boxing, Jackie Kallen, is going to talk to us about Tommy Hearns, James Toney, Emmanuel Stewart, and the heyday of the Detroit boxing scene, plus her earlier life as a young entertainment industry reporter when she interviewed, get this, Sinatra, Elvis, and the Rolling Stones. She interviewed the Rolling Stones when she was a high school kid and hung out with them. They were like 18 years old, too. So that's all coming up after a quick break. Do not touch this dial. This is going to be great stuff, and I guarantee you do not want to miss it.
Oh, boy, is this great!
I'm Dennis Taylor, co-author of the Amazon bestseller Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy. Writing this book was a labor of love for John J. Responte and myself. We enjoyed every minute of the process and considered it a privilege to tell the tale of one of the most electrifying boxing trilogies in the history of this sport. Intimate Warfare traces the collision course of Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward from their earliest days through their 3 epic fights, as well as the aftermath of this great rivalry, which culminated in one of the greatest friendships in boxing. Intimate Warfare has received a 4.5-star rating from readers and was endorsed by Hall of Famers Harold Letterman and Joe Cortez and 2-time Trainer of the Year Virgil Hunter. Our foreword was written by Ray Boom Boom Mancini, another one of the greatest blood and guts fighters of our time. Get your copy today at Amazon.com.
Hi there, it's Paul McLaughlin with your weekly roundup of everything going on in the UK boxing scene at the moment. First off, Hughie Fury missed the chance to secure a shot at Anthony Joshua's IBF World Heavyweight title, losing to Kubrat Pulev in the final eliminator. The cousin of Tyson was beaten on a unanimous decision in Sofia on Saturday night, an early cut causing him problems on his way to a brave but disappointing 117 to 111, 118 to 110, 115 to 113 defeat. Pulev took advantage in front of a sold-out arena to become the governing body's #1 contender and AJ's next mandatory challenger. We caught up with Hughie's father, Peter, after the fight to find out where it all went wrong.
The cut was already there. We had it micro-stitched 2 weeks ago, and they said, look, should be okay. So we tried to delay the fight, but he would have lost his mandatory spot. So we took a punt on it. So as soon as he hit him with a jab, our cut team here, Kerry said, as soon as that gets hit, it's coming open, and it did. So it was a really, really bad cut. So he come back in the second round, and I just said to him, look, get in there and try and get rid of him, because you're going to get stopped anyway. When your eye's hanging off, it's all going wrong, and you got to fight your way out of it. It's one of them. But his game plan was totally out the window after that.
Elsewhere at the Copper Box, John Ryder became the mandatory challenger to WBA super middleweight champion Callum Smith after beating Andrei Sirotkin in London. Ryder took his time but finally managed to break down and unlock the Sirotkin puzzle, claiming a 7th round stoppage to win the final eliminator at the Copper Box Arena. The Gorilla is now the next mandated challenger to Smith's WBA super title and will hope to get his shot in 2019. And we started off with the Furies and we will finish with the Furies. Lawrence Okolie will fly out to America to spar with Tyson ahead of his WBC title fight with Deontay Wilder and could join the heavyweight division in the future. Fury is basing himself at Big Bear Lake in California as he prepares to challenge WBC champion Wilder in Los Angeles on December the 1st, and Okolie has been called in as a sparring partner to replicate the American's fighting style. Tyson gave a candid interview the other day in the ring regarding how easy it was to set up the actual fight with the Wilder bunch.
The Klitschko's were a nightmare. They didn't want me to fight with my hands in front. They probably would have tied my hands up behind my back if they could. But Deontay Wilder is a true man of his word, and so are his team. And you've got to respect people like that. They don't want no advantages, they don't want nothing. Everyone done what they said they were going to do, and I did my bit as well. And it was made very, very quick. When two men want to fight each other and want to be the best, then things are easy to make. When one man wants to fight somebody but the other one doesn't, then nothing can ever be made. There's a saying, you can take a horse to water but you can never make it drink. And in that, Eddie Hearn brung his horse to the canal but he didn't want to drink. Not even golden water he didn't want to drink. So we stepped up and we're going to do a battle royale.
Right, that's your lot from me, guys. I'll be back next week with more boxing news. In the meantime, gloves up and protect yourselves at all times. Back to the studio.
Thanks, Paul McLaughlin. Great job, as always. Our in-depth interview with boxing legend Jackie Kallen is up next, and I promise you're going to love this one. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show, the hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast Radio.
Go on, get out of here.
Hi, I'm Dennis Taylor, host of the Ringside Boxing Show, where since 2008 we have been continuously sponsored by Garcia Boxing, the first family of the sweet science on California's beautiful Central Coast. Trainers Max and Sam Garcia and ring strategist Dean Familton are regarded among the most knowledgeable in the game. And Kathy Garcia, who manages all Garcia boxing fighters, is renowned for her integrity and career guidance, having taken 2 boxers to #1 world rankings. Together they comprise one of the most respected teams in the sport. Learn more by calling 831-261-3214 or send them an email at garciaboxing25@aol.com.
Marvin with a good left hand. There's blood all over Marvin Hagler's face. Can't tell where it's coming from. I thought it started to the bridge of the nose originally, but blood all over the face of Hagler here in round 1. But Hagler has him on the rope. Hagler working on him. Hagler relentless, but Hearns trying to box his way out. Half a minute to go in round 1. How far can this one go? Not very far in his face. This is where Hagler wants it, but Hearns counter-punching off those ropes fairly effectively. Tremendous first round. Hagler pinning him to the rope. Working on him, but Hearns uppercutting again. Hagler bloody. A tremendous, sensational first round, and Hearns gets hurt. Hearns got stunned. Hagler was stunned early in the round. Great first round. Wow. Incredible. Perhaps one of the best in middleweight history.
Welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor, and today we are reconnecting with an old friend. We haven't had on the show in too many years. Jackie Kallen, her foray into the sport of boxing came as a journalist and then as a publicist for a young fighter by the name of Tommy Hearns in Detroit, Michigan, something she did for about 10 years as a publicist. And she did that through Hearns Classic Showdowns with Sugar Ray Leonard. She morphed into a boxing manager, originally guiding the career of heavyweight Bobby Hitz, and then James Toney, who became her first world champion when he knocked out Michael Nunn in 1991. He was about a 20-1 underdog in that fight. People forget that. She also managed Bronco McCart when he won a middleweight crown in 1996, and she had her own fights over the years with boxing's good old boy establishments and also with heart disease and cancer. And in 2004, her life story became a major motion picture called Against the Ropes, in which she was portrayed by Meg Ryan. She also became a part of NBC's original Contender series back in 2005. Most recently, Jackie and Tommy Hearns have collaborated to revive local boxing in their hometown of Detroit with a fight series they're calling Boxing in the D. They staged the first event in June with a card that featured 8 undefeated Detroit boxers. Jackie, welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show. You know, I first met you when you were the original manager of our local fighter, Jose Celaya, who wound up rising to WBO's #1 world ranking in the welterweight division.
And what a great kid he is, and what a wonderful fighter. I had so much fun with Jose. He's one of my favorites. I think he's being inducted, or recently was, into the California Boxing Hall of Fame.
Yep. Tremendous honor for him, and well-deserved. So.
For sure.
Jackie, before we get into the boxing, here's something that people might not know about Jackie Kallen. You started out as a journalist for a show business magazine, and among the people you interviewed were Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, and the Rolling Stones. The biggest stars in the world can be eccentric, egotistical jerks, and I know that from my 40-plus years as a journalist. They can be smarmy. They can be very nice people. Tell us some stories. Let's start with the Stones.
Oh, my gosh. Well,
what do you remember about meeting them the first time?
The Stones were one of my, I would say, the highlights of my journalistic career, because when I met them, I was young, they were young. It was their first American tour.
Wow.
So they had never been to the States before, and they were just out of high school, and I was just graduating high school, and they were here for a whole weekend, so I had a chance to invite them to come over to my house for dinner and to meet some of my friends and get to know the American way. So we had a blast. My mom cooked for them, and I had some of my friends over, and then after dinner we went to a party with a bunch of my friends all of whom were so impressed to meet these guys from England, and never knowing how big they were going to be and how long they'd be around. My gosh, that was over 50 years ago. And then the next day I took them to the mall, because they'd never been to an American mall, with all the stores under one roof. So they really liked that. And then I let them drive my mother's car, because they'd never driven on the other side of the street. So I took them to a big, large parking area where they could, learn to drive on the other side. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun together. And I was actually reading one of their books. One of them had a book called Stone Alone that he wrote, and Charlie Watts or Bill Wyman, one of them. And they had a whole thing in there about coming to my house for dinner. So it was kind of nice to have that wonderful honor kind of put down in history like that.
What about Elvis?
Well, I was an Elvis fan, and so I always wanted to interview him, but Elvis was famous for not doing interviews. Elvis was very shy in personal life, quietly, just getting high and hanging with his friends. And, he was, by the time I met him, he was very much drug addicted. And it was one of his last performances, and he was forgetting words and just was not the Elvis I grew up, having a mad crush on. But I wanted to meet him, and I knew he did not meet journalists. And so I came up with this kind of a scheme for the mayor to give him a key to the city, and for me to be able to cover that as a journalist. So he and Colonel Parker agreed to take the key to the city, And I convinced the mayor that, of course, I had to go with him since it was my idea. And I brought a photographer from the paper and ended up spending a little bit of time with him in the locker room. And, I call it a locker room, it was a dressing room. But, my sports years took over my journalism years. So what used to be, a dressing room, now to me a locker room. But anyways, I got a chance to spend a little time with him and talk briefly to him, and of course he was so out of it. It was so sad. But I do have a couple of wonderful pictures of me and Elvis together that I will cherish. They're very special to me. Same with my pictures with the Rolling Stones and Sinatra. There's another one who's a total icon and a legend. And I grew up with his music because my mother was the most enormous Frank Sinatra fan, and we had all of his albums. And he was old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board. And I was doing I published a magazine for years that was the playbill for music theater here. When you came in, you got my magazine. It was full of stories about the acts that were there that week and ads. And I did a big story about him. And in the story, I said he's the one person I'd most like to meet. And then before he came to the theater, I pasted the article, taped it up on his mirror and circled that part. And sure enough, he told somebody from the theater to go get me. And I went back and had a wonderful meeting with him. And then again, I ran into him at a fight. Tommy Hearns and I were at the Sugar Ray Leonard Hagler fight. And Sinatra was there, and he was sitting right near us. So we took another picture together. But he was quite a guy. Not too big in stature, but what a big presence he had. I mean, you knew he was somebody special.
Was he a nice guy for you?
He was wonderful. The first time I wanted to take a picture with him, he said, well, take two. You never know if the first one's going to come out. And I said, let's take three then, just to be sure. And he laughed, and we took three really good shots. And then when I was with Tommy, he was a fan of Tommy, so he said, can I get a picture with you guys? And, of course, we were thrilled and honored to have a picture taken with him. But he was great. He was I think he liked me because I was a guy's kind of a girl. I liked boxing and gambling, and I had a Ferrari, and, we had lots to talk about, and I think he thought I was, interesting because I sure thought he was.
Man, and a lot of young people might not know this, but Frank was a huge boxing fan. He actually...
Oh, my God, he loved it.
Ali Frazier, the first one, for Life magazine, right?
Not only that, it's good that you know that fact, but he also was a huge, big supporter for Joe Louis. When Joe Louis got out of boxing and he did not have a lot of money, and he was a greeter at Caesar's Palace, he was one of the people that when you came in, greeted you at the door, and Sinatra would always come in and slip him $100 bills. And when Joe Louis's child fell in the pool and almost died, but didn't, but was, paralyzed and restricted to, a wheelchair and a breathing tube, Sinatra paid for all the medical bills.
Wow.
And Joe Louis never got that.
Jackie, who else was memorable from that period of your life? Anybody else, any other great stories?
Oh, well, I loved Peter Frampton when at the height of his career. I interviewed, all the big rock stars from, Bob Seger and Ted Nugent, and of course all the Detroit rock and rollers and all the Motown artists. And I always loved Smokey Robinson. He was such a sweet man and so nice to know. Muhammad Ali was another one of my favorites. And I turned 3 guys pro on the same night in 1992. And I asked one of his close friends if he would want to come in for the fight just to be there to, kind of be supportive to my guys. And he did. He came into the fight and came in the locker room and, gave them all a pep talk. And he did this trick where he used to look like he was levitating.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That was one of his favorite things. And he did that for the guys and signed gloves for them. And it was a real thrill for them. It was 1992, and James was already champion. And so, we had a whole machine going here. I had my own gym at that time, and we had him and Bronco and Tarek Salmasi, who later on was on the Contender, and just a great group of kids. And, now all the kids from that era are fathers and even grandfathers. James is a grandfather, Bronco's a grandfather, Tommy Hearns is a grandfather. All the fighters that I worked with 40 years ago are grandfathers now. So it's crazy to see their kids fighting. You know, Tommy has a son that fights, and he had two sons. Ronald fought, and now his younger son, Tommy Jr., is about to start, make his pro debut soon.
Wow.
So, it's interesting to see the generations and how, everybody kind of grew and expanded their lives and went in different directions, but we've all stayed friendly. And so it's kind of nice when there's ever a fight here in Detroit, all the guys that used to train at my gym are there, and all my former fighters still get together. We have reunions every year, and boxing's been great to me, and I've met some really absolutely incredible people. Every top boxer that, in the last 50 years I've met or worked with, and, you can't put a dollar sign on the value of the kind of friendships I've made and the people that I've met. Obviously, I've met Donald Trump many times because he used to own casinos in Atlantic City where my fighters fought. So I've worked with him many times over the years. I've known him with different wives. I first met him when he was with Ivana, and then another time he was with Marla. And so, I've had a chance to get to observe him over the years. And he's had some amazing parties. And one of his parties you would have loved because he had everyone from Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, to Oprah Winfrey, to all the different stars from Billy Crystal to Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, you name them. Every famous person you could think of was at this one party. This was just one night, and he had, there were so many more names, I can't even, remember all of them. I just remember meeting Jesse Jackson and thinking, what an amazing honor it was to meet somebody like that. And Oprah was great. She was with, I think she was with Marcus Allen or some football player at that time, and I'm pretty sure that's who it was. But it was in the 80s, late 80s, and it was just a great time. Everybody had money. Everybody was doing great. And the parties were over the top. Even Don King back in the day made amazing parties. After his fights, he would have these huge parties at Caesar's Palace with ice sculptures and dancers and musicians. And it was opulent back then. We just really did everything in a big way. And same with Detroit with the Kronk Gym. Before all the big Tommy Hearns title fights, we would have huge parties. We'd rent out a banquet hall or a restaurant, and we would just have caviar and champagne and the ice sculptures and strolling, musicians. And it was not like it is today, that's for sure. Things are a lot different in boxing.
As a guy who grew up in an all-white town, Broomfield, Colorado, halfway between Denver and Boulder, Tommy Hearns always, he impressed me as the kind of guy that would make me cross the street if I saw him coming the other way. And Sugar Ray Leonard, on the other hand, was a real charmer. He was a pretty boy, and he was the superstar of the Olympics. And so, I can remember rooting for Leonard because I thought he was a really nice guy and all that kind of stuff. And
he is a really nice guy.
He is, but I found Tommy to be a nicer guy than Sugar Ray.
Oh, Tommy's warmer. Tommy's a sweet, warm, gentle guy. When you look at Ray Leonard has his had in the past his drug problems, his alcohol problems, his, other kinds of issues, but Tommy Hearns never had a drink in his life, never smoked a cigarette, goes to church every weekend. He's a doting father and grandfather, and he's just one of the good guys. He's just the sweetest, nicest person I know, and we've been like brother and sister for 40 years, so he's like part of my family, and, he grew up with my kids, and I grew up with his kids, and, he's just one of the most loyal, honest, nice people I know. You can't say enough about Tommy Hearns. He's just a really terrific human being.
What was the genesis of your relationship with him? How did you end up becoming his publicist? How did you meet him?
It was a crazy story because I was an entertainment writer. I mostly covered, music, movies. I went to the Oscars, the Emmys. I went to the Grammys. Covered all that kind of stuff. And then we had, at one time in 1976, they were short sports writers, and they were trying to get an interview with a young Detroit Tiger pitcher named Mark Fidrich. They called him the Bird because he kind of looked like Big Bird. He was tall with curly hair, and he was kind of quirky. His personality was very different. And
lots of baseball on the mound. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. He talked to it. He manicured the grass with his hand, like he fixed it all up before he stood on the plate. And he was just very, very quirky. So they couldn't get an interview with him because he just didn't want to do interviews. He was young. He was shy. And so they said, well, would you want to go do an interview with him? And I said, I was young then. I was probably, 30 years old. So I said, sure. So I put on a little pair of jeans and a T-shirt and, went down and waited by the locker room where the guys came out after the game. And when he came up, I went over to him and said, introduced myself. And, of course, he paid attention because it was a female. And I told him I wrote for a newspaper and I'd love to talk to him. And he said, okay. So that was my first sports story. And it came out so great that they sent me on more assignments to do stuff with the Detroit Lions and then the Red Wings and eventually the Detroit Pistons. And by the time 1978 came along, 2 years later, they sent me to interview this young boxer that had just turned pro. And I'd never been to a live boxing match. So it was a first. And I don't know, something happened that night. It was like magic. I fell in love with the sport. I thought Tommy Hearns was amazing because he had this look in his eyes. I never saw anybody look like that. I never saw anyone look at another person with so much, it looked like to me, hatred. And I thought, he hates this man. I don't know who he's fighting, but he hates this guy. And then afterwards, when I interviewed him, I said, why do you hate him so much? He said, I don't even know him. He said, I just have to get him out of there because, that's my job. And he was so sweet and quiet. And I said, how the heck does somebody turn it on and off like that? Because when he gave that stare down before the first touching of the glove, I thought the other guy was going to shit his pants. He looked so scared. And I just thought, wow, how do you go from being that to being this sweet kid? He was like 19 years old. He was a baby. And that was just who he was. He just had that switch. And when he turned it on, guys would it was like with Tyson. They'd be afraid before he threw a punch. And from that point on, the next time there was a local fight, I went again, and I interviewed Emmanuel Stewart. And he told me he had these two fighters that he was turning pro, Tommy and Mickey Goodwin. And then I did a story on Mickey Goodwin, who was his other fighter at the time. And then he got Hilmer Kenty, and he asked me if I would do a story on Hilmer. And after that, he said, why don't you come work for us? You can do our bios and help with the press conferences and the weigh-ins. And that was 1978, 40 years ago, and I'm still in boxing.
Wow. What you said a minute ago is something that a lot of people on the peripheries of boxing or outside of boxing don't really realize, and that's that most fighters that I've met, actually, they do turn it on and off. Outside the ring, they're the nicest people you're ever going to meet. For the most, I guess, because they get out their aggressions in the gym, and in the ring.
Absolutely right. That's exactly right. And they have nothing to prove. You know what I mean? They are the masters of their craft. They get in there. They do something that most of us would never do, and that's let someone punch you over and over again. And they do it, and they love it, or they wouldn't be doing it. Some of them do it for money near the end. But for the most part, these young kids coming up, they love what they do, and there's a skill set that they have to learn. It's not like it's not a street fight. You don't just get out there and just throw wildly. You have to know. You have to perfect your jab. You have to know where to put your feet, how to tuck your elbows in, how to tuck your chin into your shoulder, how to block shots, how to throw a correct left hook so you get right in that sweet spot on the ribs. You have to learn uppercuts. It's a whole toolbox. And until you filled that box with all the tools, then you can go out there and fight anybody because you know you're well prepared and well equipped. And I found it to be a fascinating sport because it's not like a team sport where you have a position and there's somebody next to you, behind you. You're out there all alone.
Yep.
And you're right in front of someone who wants to hurt you. That's their goal, is to hurt you. It's not like they accidentally check you in hockey or, take you down in football. This is somebody who for 3 minutes straight is in there trying to knock your head off.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it psychologically fascinating what goes on in a man's mind or a woman when they're put in front of another person whose goal is to hurt them. And so that's what kind of drew me into the sport. And then, of course, I learned all the components to it. I learned how to pick the right sparring partners, how to stop a cut, how to wrap hands properly to protect the knuckles right, and how to put the tape on so it's not too tight. And, I studied it with Emmanuel Stewart. He let me learn. He let me watch him. And I practiced stopping cuts. I learned how to slice open a raw steak and then squeeze out the blood and then stop it inside the cut. And I practiced. And I just learned all the different sides of the sport. And that's why I went from being a publicist and a boxing writer to a boxing manager and then a promoter. I've done promotions. I've owned a gym. I've done just about everything there is to do except get in the ring myself. And I've only done that one time. And I was mad at Bobby Hitz. And he was my first fighter, and he's a heavyweight. And I was so mad at him. I said, just get in the ring. And I put on the gloves, and I just punched him. And I just said, don't hit me back, but just let me hit you. And he did, and I broke a nail. And I said, and I broke it all the way down. And I got out of there, took off the glove, and it was bleeding my finger because the nail broke down so close. And that was the last time I put on a glove. So it was a lesson well learned. If you're going to be,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you're going to be a woman, I was going to say, if you're going to be a woman boxing, cut your nails down. Don't try to do it with long nails.
I was going to tell you, Kathy and Max Garcia, 2-3 years in a row, had celebrity boxing in Monterey, and I got to be part of it one time, and my opponent was Celaya. And
how fun was that? Did he go easy on you?
It was a blast. It was me against Jose Celaya in the MGM in the Grand Ballroom at the Hyatt Regency in Monterey.
Oh, how fun! Well, speaking of whom, they're the nicest people. Those are two of the nicest people. Max and Kathy.
Well, so I'm standing there with Jose side by side when we're getting ready to come out, and we're both in our robes and our trunks and stuff. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, what are the ground rules here? Can I hit you?" And he just looked at me. He gave me this big grin. He said, "You want to hit me?" He said, "Bring it on, buddy. What do you think? You think you're going to hurt me?" And I got a front out of him with a body shot, and he took a step back, and he put a jab on my forehead and knocked me backwards about 4 steps, and then just grinned at me.
Just to let you know who you were in there with, and don't get cocky. Yeah, don't think because you connected once that you're, Mike Tyson. Yeah, he's a great guy, Jose, and the Garcias are wonderful. I mean, you've got some really good people up there. You really do.
Yep.
I used to love coming up that way when Jerry was doing the fights there.
Yeah, Jerry Hoffman.
And, he was a great guy.
He definitely was.
So what else is going on up there in your neck of the woods? Who's the hottest fighter coming out of that area now?
Max has a great guy right now. His name's Ruben Villa IV. He was a 15-time national amateur champion. He's a featherweight. Lost to Shakur Stevenson in the Olympic trials after beating him twice during the same year.
Wow.
He's now 14-0, only has 5 knockouts, but he is lightning fast and just a beautiful, beautiful fighter. So that's Max's main guy right now, and he's also training Joel Diaz Jr., no relation to the trainer. Yeah, his only loss is to the Rougarou, Regis Prograis.
That's good. It's good to know that they're still doing what they love. I know I've got 2 undefeated kids now that are both doing really well. I've got a light heavyweight here in Detroit named Taylor Dewar, an Irish kid, nice-looking boy and a very intelligent kid. He's a recovering alcoholic, and he does a lot of counseling for other kids and other adults who are going through, recovery and, who are trying to put their lives back together. He's become really good at counseling them. And then I have a 12-0 kid, a junior welterweight, 140, named Myquan Williams. He's in Connecticut, and he's signed with Lou DiBella, and he's doing great. So he should fight again, hopefully, before the end of the year. And he's now starting to get noticed and rated, so it takes him a little bit of time. Yep. And, took almost 3 years to get to this point, 2.5. And hopefully within a year he'll be doing 10-round main event fights. But it's still, the thrill to me is still finding the young kids, turning them pro. I mean, I first met Mike Kwame when he was 14, and he was an amateur. And we stayed in touch till he turned 18. And his trainer, Paul Sichan, is a really good guy. And he told me about him, and he said, keep your eye on this kid, and I did. And then I signed him right after his 18th birthday. So he's only 20 now. So he's going to be 21, and his life is really is turning out beautiful for him because he came from a bad background. His father was killed when he was a baby, just newborn. And then his mother remarried, and they started a nice family, and their house burned down, and they had nothing, and they were homeless. And, they've built themselves back up since then. And, having my Kwan fight has been a wonderful thing for them because, they all go to his fights, the whole family. And it's just, they're really great people. So I hope he goes all the way. He definitely has the talent.
This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California. I'm Dennis Taylor. We are talking to the First Lady of Boxing, Jackie Kallen. Jackie, I think when you talk to any really knowledgeable observer of boxing, they're going to tell you that James Toney was one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. This is a guy who... I agree with that. Yeah. A guy who TKO'd Michael...
Defensively, you couldn't touch him, right? You could not touch him defensively.
And he'd stand right in front of you and you still couldn't hit him.
Right. One of the best defenses in boxing in the last, I'd say 40 years for sure, 40 to 50 years. You can't touch that guy. Now, of course, he's 50 years old, but when he was 20, 25, fast and defensive and slick, he won fights that he was not supposed to win. Now, when I found him, he had 4 fights. He had no manager. His manager had been killed. And I was in the gym with Bobby Hitz, and I was watching him spar one day. And he got out of the ring, and he was so mad that the guy, got the best of him. He went in the locker room, and he just started punching the lockers with his bare hands. And I thought, wow, this kid's got a lot in him. He's got a lot of intensity. So I watched him for about a month, and then his trainer came up to me and said, would you be interested in working with him? And I said, absolutely, of course. And it just was one of those little just magical things. Like the first night I went to a fight, I felt magic in the air. And same thing happened when James and I came together. I thought, this kid's going all the way. He's mean. And, I mean, he had a mean streak in him that was good and bad, The good side of him was incredible. The bad side of him was challenging. But at the end of the day, he was a great fighter. Not good, but great. And when they put us against a guy named Murky Sosa, and I know we were not supposed to win. It was a 50-50 fight, and at that time, I think it was like to test him. If he beats Murky Sosa, then they were going to move him. And he did, convincingly. And then the guy that was supposed to fight Michael Nunn hurt his shoulder, and they asked if we would take the fight. And everybody said to me, you've got to be kidding. He's not ready. That's a big step up. And, Michael Nunn is second to none, the greatest, middleweight out there right now. Yep. And I said, no, because I have the greatest middleweight out there right now. And so I took the fight. And like you mentioned earlier, he was a massive underdog. I mean, 20-1. I mean, that's not even that's a ridiculous odds. And if I was smart, I would have bet him. But I don't believe in betting on your own fighters because that's sort of a jinx right there. But he wasn't winning. Up until the 9th round, he was behind on points. So I knew he needed a knockout to win. So you're in another man's hometown at a stadium filled with, I guess, 8,000 to 10,000 people, all for the other guy. I mean, we had about 30 people with us that drove in from Michigan, but Davenport, Iowa was not paying one bit of attention to James Toney. Michael Nunn was the local hero. He stayed in a suite at this beautiful hotel, and called the Black Hawk. I remember that. And we were at it wasn't even a Hampton Inn. It was more like a Motel 6 or someplace. And it was just, obviously we were the challenger, and we were treated like the challenger. And when he won that fight, both of our lives changed irreversibly. And from that point on, it was limousines and suites and, all the good things that come to a world champion. So we literally went from Motel 6 to Caesar's Palace. So it was quite a difference. And so his life changed, my life changed. And then, of course, I got Bronco McCart, who had just lost the National Golden Glove, and everybody said he's just an average white kid. You're not going to go very far with him. And I gave him to Bill Miller, who was training James at the time, and I said, Bill, get as much out of this kid as you can get out of him. He's a southpaw. He was slick, and we got him to a world title. And, it was just a thrill for me. Along the way, I managed Pinklin Thomas for a while, the heavyweight. I worked with Tom Boom Boom Johnson, who was a lightweight champion, featherweight, lightweight, and I had a chance to work with some amazing talent. And, of course, my fighters fought all over the world, from Monte Carlo to Paris to Hong Kong, and a lot of my fighters fought at the Garden. They fought for Russell Peltz in the Blue Horizon and fought at the Olympic in L.A., and, of course, all the hotels in Vegas, from the Hilton to Caesars to the MGM. So it's been an amazing career for me because I've seen it from the bottom and I've seen it from the top. And here I am with these new young fighters seeing it from the bottom again, going to different cities. And we're not staying in suites and there's no, limos picking me up from the airport. But we'll get there. And the beauty is being able to be happy at the top and at the bottom and all the way in the middle. So, I don't mind staying in the smaller hotels, and I don't mind, what it takes to get to the top, because that's part of the fun of it. And there's that sense of accomplishment when you take this young, raw talent and you go from the smaller venues all the way up to the MGM. So that for me, that's the satisfaction. I'm getting older. I'm 72. Luckily, I'm in great health, and I jump around and go everywhere, and I have a lot of energy. But, will I be doing this in 10 years? Probably not. But then again, maybe I will be.
We can all hope that we're still going at it at 82 for sure.
Well, I hope so, because right now I've got the energy of my kids, maybe even less, younger age than that, because for some reason I don't get that tired. So I can go all day, and run and go and do and travel, and I don't get jet lag. And I just have I'm very, very blessed that I have, a huge supply of energy. And as long as the body holds out and the brain holds out, who knows how long I'll do this.
Yep. Well, heck, look at Aram. He's still going.
I know, he is. And he's got to be, 86?
Yeah, he's definitely getting up there, but you wouldn't know it. Talking to Jackie Kallen on the Ringside Boxing Show. Jackie, James Toney was he was mercurial and he could be dangerous, and he to me he seemed unmanageable. You were his manager. What was that like? What kind of challenge was that at times?
Oh my gosh, I can't say a bad thing about him because we were together for over 6 years, and he lived in my house part of that time. I planned his wedding. I was there when his daughter was born, and his first daughter, and we were very close, but he's a moody guy, obviously, he had his days where he was so sweet and so generous, and we'd go shopping, he'd buy everybody something. We'd go to the mall, and he'd buy all the other fighters a pair of shoes, and $100 shoes. He would buy me purses, and just sweetness. And then he'd have his days where he would punch the mirrors in the gym and knock them all, off the wall. Or he would take a scale when the weight wasn't right, and he'd push it through the drywall into the office next door to the gym. He was very up and down. And so you never knew exactly what you were going to get.
If I asked you to reminisce about the heyday of the Kronk Gym, what images immediately come to mind? What was it like walking in
Oh,
there?
my gosh. Well, I first walked into the Kronk Gym in 1988, and the only guys that you'd know of or anyone would know of was Mickey Goodwin, who's deceased now, unfortunately, as is Emmanuel, and Tommy Hearns and a bunch of amateurs. But it was down the basement of a rec center in the city. And, upstairs they had basketball court and they had rooms for meetings and things like that. But the basement was hotter than hell. They kept it about 98, 99 all the time. And in the summer, there was no air conditioning. So in the summer down there, it was 110, whatever. And the first time I went there, I couldn't believe that it was that hot. And I could not take off enough clothes because, I was the only woman there, and there's only so far down I could go. I took off my coat, and I took off, I had like a blazer, like over a skirt and a top. And I realized that wasn't going to cut it anymore. So when I'd go down there, I knew just wear a tank top and wear a pair of jeans because it was that hot. And they had bugs there, of course, from the heat. There was cockroaches, and I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't know what a cockroach was, and I didn't realize until I got in the car coming home from there that there were a couple of cockroaches that had gotten into my purse because it was just sitting there on the bench. And I was driving home, and one of them crawled out and got on my lap, and I'm so lucky I didn't get in an accident, but I pulled over on the side of the freeway and was screaming, and people came to the car and one, helped me out and found the two. One was still in the purse, but I found you have to zip up your purse when you're at the Kronk Gym because you don't know what was going to be in there. One time I came home, somebody's mouthpiece that they spit out ended up in my purse. It was full of blood and goop and stuff. So I learned to zip up my purse, but it was ferocious down there. Once, I'd say by 1980, when Hilmer Kenty was there and won the title, and then Tommy won the title later that year, and they had Milt McCrory coming up and Jimmy Paul and all these guys that were going to become world champions. The sparring down there was like nothing that I've ever seen before or since, really. We had some great sparring at my Galaxy Gym with James Toney and Bronco and Tarek and those guys, but not like Kronk. The sparring was more intense than the fights usually were for most of the guys down there. They would beat each other to a pulp. The sparring was like a fight, and they learned from each other. If somebody had a jab that the other guy liked, he'd watch it and learn, and they'd teach each other. They helped each other. As hard as they sparred, they'd get out of the ring and they'd hug and they'd go out afterwards. And it was a family. The Kronk Gym was a family of very poor kids from the inner city who found each other and found Emmanuel and realized that they had potential. And the trainers there were the old school trainers. They were not cornermen. They were teachers. They would teach you the fundamentals. By the time you got in the ring, you knew what you were doing. Their amateurs were better than a lot of pros. And everybody there was one for all and all for one. And I used to print a magazine for every fight, the Kronk, connection. And we had bios of all the fighters and pictures of our whole team. And it started out just about 6 of us. Then it was 12. And then it got to the point where it was 2 pages full of fighters, trainers, a publicist, that was me. We had 2, lawyers that worked for Emmanuel that were on the team. We had an accountant that helped the kids with their money. We had a cook. We had masseuses. It became a huge machine. The Kronk Gym was huge. Then we started with the merchandise, the red and yellow jackets. And the Kronk logo became known. And, it was an amazing machine. It was a well-oiled machine that just turned out champions, one after another. And then people like Ray Leonard, Mark Breland, and Mike Tyson, and guys from all over would come to Detroit and go to Kronk for sparring because they couldn't get aspiring on that level wherever they were. And so we had every fighter that you can imagine coming down to Kronk just to kind of study with Emmanuel and to spar with the guys that he had. Sometimes we had 3-4 champions at a time, you know, in the gym, and then we'd have 2-3 guys like Ray Mancini and Hector Camacho, guys from neighboring states would come in to train and stay in Detroit for a few weeks. It was wonderful. It was the 80s and 90s in Detroit boxing were an era that I don't know if we'll ever repeat.
What was it like for you to watch Hearns fight Leonard the first time?
Well, you know, at that time I'd been with him for, you know, a couple of years, 3 years, and so, you know, we were pretty close, and his mother and his sisters and brothers and my brother and our whole families had gotten to be really close. And so I was very emotionally involved in that fight, and I was like in that ring with him spiritually the whole time. And at that time, I was so sure he was going to win. I did not think, you know, we had been trying to get that fight with Leonard for a while, so we were coming up with, from a publicity standpoint, I had all these little schemes. He went to one of Ray's fights and threw a rubber chicken in the ring and, you know, said that he was chicken to fight him. And, you know, I mean, this was 40 years ago, so it was all kinds of goofy little things we did. But eventually the fight was made for September of 1981, and I was so sure that he was going to win. I went out and bought a very expensive outfit. I remember it from head to toe. I did it up. I mean, everything. I thought this was the biggest night of my life, right? And I went and I bet, and this was 1981, and I bet $15,000, which I would never do today, because that $50,000 today would probably be, what, 50, 60? Mm-hmm. 40 years later, I don't know how much, but at any rate, I bet it. And when he got into that 12th round, I thought he was going to win. I was really sure. I was ready to go, you know. I was planning what I was going to do with my winnings. And then the 13th round and the 14th round, and then it was like, oh, shit. This is not going the way I thought. And I was almost inconsolable afterwards. All of us were. You know, we all just, it was a shock, because obviously you go into a fight and you know there's a chance you're going to lose. But, you know, it taught me a good lesson, because I never bet like that on a fight again. And when James fought Roy Jones, it was a similar kind of a thing for me emotionally. You know, I felt my heart was in my throat the whole time. It was the biggest fight of his career at that point. But I knew what it felt like when you don't win. So I didn't have that same sense of invincibility with James that I did have. So I knew it was possible that Roy Jones could win. So, you know, I was praying that the outcome would be different. But after watching Tommy lose, I knew that feeling, that agony of defeat. They used to say that on ABC Sports. Yep. You know, and that was the agony of defeat both times, because when James lost to Roy Jones, that was the same feeling I had when Tommy lost to Ray Leonard. And the other fight that was really painful for me was when Tommy lost to Marvin Hagler.
Yeah.
Because the first 3 rounds were unbelievable. And, I mean, it was just so exciting. And then when he got hit and went down, it was like, oh, no, you know. That was a hard one. But I think that fight's what really bonded Tommy and I, because after the fight, I remember when he came home, he did not come out of his house for a while, and he didn't want to do any interviews. And I remember I wrote him this long letter, took it over to him, and I just explained to him, you know, losing is part of life, and, you know, all the people that were around you, some of them might not be there anymore, but the ones that are your true friends are going to be there for you next year and 10 years from now and 25 years from now. And we still talk about that, because that's exactly what happened. You know, when you're not the champ anymore, it's lonely, because all the people that were there for you, you know, when you were at the top and flying here and flying there, and, you know, they're always around. And I think that there's hangers-on in any business, especially if it's a high profile, like an athlete or a singer or an actor. There's always the hangers-on. But where are they later? It's pretty sad. And Tommy's managed to keep a lot of his friends, And, you know, I'll always be in his corner with him, and we do things together, and his family and my family. And, you know, he just had his birthday last week, and we had a big birthday party for him, and he turned 60. And, you know, now he and I have a business together. We're promoting fights. We did a fight here in June, and, you know, we're doing another one beginning of the year. And we're finding other things at this stage of our lives, you know, because we're not the same two people that we were 40 years ago. And yet our friendship has endured and is just as strong as it was the very first day I met him.
Talking to Jackie Kallen on the Ringside Boxing Show. Jackie, do you have a story you can tell us that kind of epitomizes the resistance that you ran into as a pioneer female manager in a sport that was built on testosterone?
Well, there's a lot of them, but the ones that stand out to me were the hurtful ones, I mean, obviously the first thing that I noticed when I got into the sport was that everybody was assuming that I was sleeping with the fighters, you know, because I remember the first time someone, and I was married with 2 young kids, I remember someone asked me if Tommy was my boyfriend, and I was so caught off guard by that because I went, huh? I mean, I'm his publicist, I work with him, but that was the first time I realized that people, their minds go in different directions than where mine would have gone. Mm-hmm. And so that was a little bit hard to get used to, the fact that people always assume whatever they want to assume. But after about a year, I realized I don't care what anyone thinks. I know the truth, and I don't really care. So that kind of passed, and that didn't bother me anymore. Then there was the people that thought I shouldn't be in the business. So therefore, you know, I would go to get in the ring with my fighter afterwards, and they wouldn't let me in the ring. And they would say, well, girlfriends and wives can see him later. I'd say, no, but I'm the manager. Yeah, right. And where's your husband? Where's your father? Who's the manager? And I'd say, I'm the manager. And they would just go, yeah, right, lady. And they would just push me aside. I couldn't get in the ring sometimes, even with my own fighter when he won a fight. And the other guy, you know, his people are all around him, and me, I'm supposed to just stay in the back and see him later. And those things were hurtful. And I once had a boxing writer, a well-known boxing writer, say to me, you know, why don't you just go put on a bikini, you know, and be a ring girl? You know, that's what you should be doing. And later on, he said he meant it as a compliment. He says, oh, I thought because you looked so hot, you could be a ring girl. But he didn't mean it that way, and I knew it. You know, he just felt that I had no business in the sport other than, you know, to objectify myself as a female in a bikini. And, you know, in today's era, in the Me Too movement, you know, some of the stuff that I put up with wouldn't really fly today. But I was a tough girl. You know, I grew up with a brother and no sisters, and my dad was one of 3 brothers, and then I married a guy that was one of 4 brothers, and then I had 2 sons. So I was always around a lot of men and boys, and so I was tough on the inside, and things like that didn't bother me. They annoyed me, but they didn't get me down, or they didn't discourage me to say, well, I don't belong in this sport. It just was more like an F you. I'm here, and I'm going to stay here. And, you know, where will you be 10 years? I was still going to be in boxing. And here it is 40 years later, and I don't know where half those people are. But I'm still in boxing. So I always had the gumption and the perseverance to hang in there. But, you know, I took a lot of crap from, you know, different promoters that would say, oh, you want your kid on my card? Well, what are you going to do for me? And, you know, it's the same stuff that these girls are going through today. You know, that wasn't invented, you know, in this century. It was certainly going on 50 years ago, and I'm sure 100 years before that. But it's how you deal with it. So, you know, I had a couple times where I was out of town, and I had certain people that would come to my room at night and call the room and want to come up and want to know if I would do this and that for them. And I just had to, you know, hang in there and do my job. And, you know, they would test me all the time. You know, you don't know shit about this, or you don't know that, or they'd ask me a question that they assumed I didn't know the answer to. And then when I did, then they would shut up. But, you know, it was constantly being tested. And, oh, you think you're one of the guys? Well, we're all going out, you know, to a strip club. Why don't you come with us? You know, well, no, that's okay. You guys go. Have a good time. You know, just little things trying to make me feel like I wasn't part of the business I was in. And, you know, luckily for the girls today, it's not like that. You know, I hope not anyways. There still aren't that many women in boxing, but, you know, there's a few, and hopefully they're having an easier go of it. I would like to think so anyways.
Did things get better for you after Toney beat Nunn?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because before that, they thought I was stupid. They would say to me, oh, you're going to let her manage your career? You know, what are you, stupid? What does she know? What the hell does she know? She's a publicist, so she's been around 10 years. Big deal. What does she know? And then, especially when I took the Nunn fight, everybody was writing things about, you know, questionable decision by his female manager and blah, blah. But after he won, it was like, well, maybe it's not a fluke. And then as he went on to beat McCallum twice and, you know, beat a lot of really good fighters, Prince Charles Williams and guys that were top at that time, Anthony Hember, then they started to say, well, maybe she does know what she's doing. And then when Bronco won, and I had other guys that were doing great, you know, by then they started to, you know, kind of leave me alone about telling me I was stupid or didn't know what I was doing. They didn't do that anymore. But it was still that old boys network because in 1991, James was nominated for Fighter of the Year, and I was nominated for Manager of the Year. And those usually go hand in hand, like the Academy Awards, the Best Picture and the Director, they usually go hand in hand. Well, that year he was up against Buddy McGirt, who was fighting then, and his manager was up for Manager of the Year. Well, they gave James Fighter of the Year because they had to, he was that good, but they gave Buddy McGirt's manager of the Year, even though his fighter wasn't Fighter of the Year. And that was just typical of what I went through. Had to be twice as good as everyone else because I was a woman. Well, I got Manager of the Year the next year in 92. So I did get it, but I didn't get it the year I probably should have gotten it. But at least they gave me that respect a year later. And so it's, you know, it was always a little bit of that proving yourself and trying to show that you can hang with the guys, but you're not one of the guys. And you are a girl, but you're not, you know, going to be their girlfriend or anything. So it was finding my place, making my name, and then just sticking to it and knowing that if I screwed up, if I made any bad decisions or got my guys beat or, you know, ended up, you know, getting into a jam with drugs or other stuff, I wouldn't be in the business very long.
Yeah.
So, you know, now it's been 40 years, so obviously I kept my nose clean. I've never ever taken a dime from a fighter that wasn't written down on paper and explained where every dollar came from. I've never cheated a person out of anything, and I've always tried to deal honestly with the networks, with the other managers, with the promoters, and, you know, I've never had a dispute with a fighter where I've been in a lawsuit. If they wanted to be released, I would say, here you go. If you think it's better with someone else, go, be my guest. And so because of that, you know, I'm still doing it. And you can't burn bridges in this business. You have to overlook a whole lot of things and forgive it and move forward. Because if you burn a bridge and you don't go back over that bridge, you never know if in the future you're going to have to. And so even the people that were mean to me or dismissive to me or, you know, condescending, I just forgave it and moved forward. And there's some of the same people I work with today were the people that weren't that great to me 25 years ago, but that's okay. You know, at the end of the day, it's all good.
Jackie, I mentioned this at the top, but you and Tommy Hearns put together a fight card in Detroit in June. How well did that go, and are there plans to do others?
Yes, it went really, really well. We did it at a hotel ballroom downtown, and we did it in connection with Detroit Dog Rescue, which is a obviously what it sounds like. They rescue dogs off the street and find homes for them. So we had a different dog up for adoption. Between all the different fights, we'd bring another dog into the ring, and all the dogs got adopted that night. So it was very successful, and we had a silent auction with a lot of sports memorabilia, and it was just a really nice night, and all the fighters obviously were treated very well. We put everyone up in nice rooms, and we wanted to do it first class so that it was not just another local fight, but it had the feel of a bigger fight. And it was very successful, and we're going to do it again right after the new year. Tommy's going to England now for a few weeks, and then when he gets back, we're going to, pick our date and start lining up who we want to have on the card. But we're hoping to do at least 5 or 6 shows in 2019. We'd like to go every other month, but it's hard to find a location that's got the same days available that we want each month. But, we're going to try to do at least 5 or 6. And then we'll see how that goes. But it's all about getting sponsors, because you need sponsors to do a club show. If you don't have TV, there's only so much you can get from the gate. And if you want to pay your fighters fairly, you have to have sponsor money. So that's what we're going to work on getting, so that we can come out in 2019 with some good sponsors.
And you're a motivational speaker. What kind of message do you try and deliver to your audiences, considering the wars that you've been through during your life and career?
I think the biggest message that I try to, put out there to mostly, I talk to a lot of women's groups, is to know who you are and know your value and accept who you are. You're not going to be, like for me, I knew I was never going to be a singer. I never was going to be an actress. I never was athletic, so I knew I was never going to be a good tennis player. I found my skill was writing. And so I built my life around communication, writing, and the things that I knew I was really good at. Management was one of them, because I'm very organized. So I found my little path, my wheelhouse, as you may. And so I try to tell people, find what you really love, because you're going to be doing it for a long time. If you're in a job you hate, do something you love, even if it's less money. Do something that you're happy doing every day. And don't compare yourself to other people. That's another lesson that's very important to me, is be who you are. There's people who have more than you. There's people that have less than you. Just know your place in the big picture. And instead of focusing on who's younger, richer, prettier, more successful, look at how far you've come and look how great you've done compared to so many other people. And once you find your spot and you're comfortable in that spot, life is wonderful. I mean, every day is full of new adventures. I mean, we all have our setbacks. And I try to explain to people, being a woman and a white woman was kind of a setback for me in my career. And then health-wise, like you said, I've had melanoma. I have 4 heart stents. I have glaucoma. I'm blind in one eye. I have osteoporosis. But you know what? Those are just things. We all have things. No one gets out of here without getting things. My message is to love your life and accept all the good and the bad. Don't get cocky with the stuff that's good and think you're better than anyone. And don't sit home and have a pity party over the bad things, because if you look at the big picture, you're probably better than a lot of people. And I just want everyone to enjoy their life, because you only go through one time, and you want it to be the best it can be. And a smile and a good word to somebody makes every day a little bit better. And I seem to get good response with that, and makes people think. And that's all you can do, is try to make the world a better place.
And you've also you got 2 podcasts, right? Not 1, but 2. Tell us about those.
I do a podcast every Monday on New Radio Media, and it's heard, all over the world, anyone that has a computer or an iPad or whatever. And it's a show just on whatever I want to talk about. Sometimes I have a group of girls, and it's like The View. Sometimes I have a group of guys, and we talk about women. I've had Tommy on the show, and Tarek Falmasi, and Boom Boom Johnson, and we've had a lot of boxing shows. And then I do another show on Tuesday nights, which is I co-host it with the plastic surgeon. And it's just about how to look as good as you can for as long as you can. And that includes men, too, because more and more men are getting facials and doing things with themselves to look better and look younger. And it's a fascinating show. I love doing it. So between the 2 fighters and the 2 shows and my motivational speaking and my 5 grandchildren and the 3rd book I'm writing, I'm pretty busy.
5 grandkids. Did any of them flirt with the notion of becoming a boxer, and did you try to nudge them in a different direction? Actually, no. My 2 sons tried it, and they were just little amateurs. They one went into law and one went into building. He's a builder. And then my older grandson's 22. He just graduated Michigan State, and he's a financial advisor with Raymond James. He does extremely well for a young kid. And then his brother, who's 18, is a highly acclaimed
hockey player in the state, and he'll be going to play for a Division I school when he graduates. So, they chose hockey as their sport, both of them. And the other ones are too little to decide if they want to box or not, but I think not, because our family's always been into hockey. So I think my little 6-year-old grandson, is already taking his hockey lessons. So I guess that's as far as boxing went in the family. It rests with me.
Hey, that's probably a good thing.
Well, at least they have clean, pretty faces.
Yeah, absolutely. And hockey's as close as they can get to boxing without being a boxer, I think.
Believe me, it's pretty brutal. You get a lot of cuts in that sport too. But luckily they've been lucky and they still have no scars. And they love it. They're both really good players, so that helps too. But anyways, it was wonderful talking to you. You certainly touched on a lot of wonderful subjects, and let's not make it this many years before we talk again.
That's a deal. Jackie Kallen. Hey, we also want to mention that Jackie Kallen is the author of 2 books, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, A Fight Plan for Dealing with All of Life's Hard Knocks, and the second one is Between the Ropes, which is an autobiography. Jackie, always great catching up with you, and thanks for...
Oh, you too, Dennis. Thank you so much.
Jackie Kallen, the First Lady of Boxing on the Ringside Boxing Show. Thanks, Jackie. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, do you like this show? Do us a solid and tell your boxing friends about us. Post the Ringside Boxing Show on your social media sites and help us grow. Also, if you have not yet discovered the #1 boxing website in the world for daily boxing news, you've got something to add to your bucket list. We update RingsideBoxingShow.com 365 days a year with the biggest headlines and the hottest stories every single day. If you are a hardcore fan of the sweet science, this should be your first stop every morning, and it might be the only boxing site you need to visit all day. Check it out right now and be amazed. RingsideBoxingShow.com. Thanks, as always, to our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Risponti, our outstanding British correspondent, Paul McLaughlin, and, of course, another huge thanks to today's featured guest, the First Lady of Boxing, Jackie Kallen. And, of course, we appreciate you, Ringside Nation, for being a part of our worldwide audience again today. Keep your chin tucked, and we will talk to you again next week on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Well, it's a great day for me to whoop somebody's ass. It's a bad day, so you better get off of my back. You might get cold cocked if you cross my path. It's a great day